f of x equals x minus 2, g of x equals 2x plus 1. Find f of g of x and g of f of x. Alright, so f of g of x is called a composition of functions. Same with g of f of x. Now, what does this mean? What does this mean? What is f of g of x? We know it's a composition of functions, but what does that really mean? Okay, so when we say f of g of x, what we mean by that is that's equal to f of g of x. So that's what we mean by f of g of x. Okay. In other words, whatever x is, we'll replace x with g of x. Now, what is g of x? G of x is given. Okay. In fact, this is our g of x, so that's not your problem anymore. G of x is always there. It's given. It has a value. So all that's left to do is just substitute that value to your function. So whatever x is, you change that to g of x. So for example, our f of x is x minus 2. Okay, so that means wherever x occurs, you'll change that with g of x. Okay, so let me write a side note here. So f of x equals x minus 2. That's our original function. Again, wherever x occurs, change that to g of x. Okay, so that means we have f of, instead of writing x, we'll write g of x equals, instead of writing x, we'll change that into g of x. And then copy the remaining terms with no x. So that's minus 2. Now, well, what is g of x? Well, g of x is 2x plus 1. Okay, so we can actually substitute f of, instead of writing g of x, well, g of x is 2x plus 1. So say 2x plus 1 equals, instead of writing g of x, we'll write 2x plus 1 minus 2. And then we'll just make simplifications from here. Okay, so we'll have equals, well, that's 2x plus 1 minus 2 equals 2x plus 1 minus 2 is minus 1. So there you have it. That is our answer. This is f of g of x. So that's so that's f of g of x. So basically, wherever x happens to occur, change that into g of x. Okay, let's see what we'll have here in our second example. We're asked to find g of f of x. It's kind of the other way around. Okay. So what is g of f of x? Well, again, g of f of x equals g of f of x. So that's what you mean by this notation right here. That means, our g of x is 2x plus 1. Okay, so wherever x appears, change that into f of x. Okay, because this is where x is supposed to be, right? But we change that into f of x. Okay, so wherever x appears, change that into f of x. So that means we'll have g of f of x. Okay, equals to, again, wherever x appears, change that into f of x plus 1. Copy the remaining terms with no x's. And then substitute. What is f of x? F of x is x minus 2. So you'll have x minus 2 equals 2 times, well, what is our f of x? F of x again is x minus 2. X minus 2. Let me use another color for this. Okay, that will be x minus 2 plus 1. And that is equal to, let's distribute 2 to both terms. You have 2x minus 4 plus 1. Simplify. 2x minus 4 plus 1 is minus 3. And so that is our answer. That's g of f of x. And there you go. Oops, sorry. There you go. So that's g of f of x.